Okay, here we go. I'm bringing up Universalism this morning. Phil, actually, and it was good because we need to know more about it, has suggested it. And it's a good, especially in smaller congregations, because a lot of us don't know the history. And we want to be more than just a bunch of liberals sitting around talking. Because we have a history. We have a history, and we need to know, and I'm going to give you a little bit of it today. Some of it even I forget. The other reason I wanted to bring it up, because, for instance, there's a very, there's a woman in our congregation who's been there for many years, out in Black Mountain, and I'm very fond of her, and her whole family, they attend. But she forgets that we are Universalists as well. And she'll get up and do the welcome, and she'll welcome everybody to the Unitarian congregation of the Swananoa Valley. And she forgets that we are Universalists as well. And so I think that this will be something that we will get something out of this morning. There are many ways in which we may achieve our identity and find meaning and direction in life, right? We all know that. There's probably as many ways as there are people here this morning. But one important way is through a continuous tradition. For obvious reasons, we can pass it on to the young, but we do have a tradition. One's family history or national history may be of help. For me personally, a religious tradition has been of great assistance for me to forge at least part of my identity. What's important about it is that I was free to choose it, which is one of the reasons that I became a Unitarian Universalist. As a matter of fact, it was extremely important. And for many years, I had identified myself as a Unitarian. And I still do in some ways, but as I searched and studied the Universalist side of our faith, its richness and its depth, its messages and witnesses convinced me to make it my own. The most powerful image, powerful Weltanschauung, powerful perspective or worldview in Universalism is that of God's love for all. And again, those of you who may be uncomfortable with the word, put another word there. We're big enough now that we don't have to quibble over vocabulary. This love is unconditional. It is nurturing, it is mysterious, and it is transforming. It urges us to reach out in spite of all the obstacles that life can place in front of us. And it urges us to reach out and touch other people with compassion, to touch the earth and one another and the universe beyond. It's not the only way, but it is a powerful way. Those Universalists who took this message seriously, such as Claire Barton, tending to the wounded under fire on Civil War battlefields, still resonate with us today. We Universalists strive to transcend the marginalization of humanity into those who are saved and those who are not. We reject that. All are children of the universe. All are children of love. And remember, Universalism is the blue-collar side of our denomination. I would like to personally see more pickup trucks in parking lots on Sunday morning at Unitarian Universalist congregations. It was also, it's a tough message. It was very difficult for even African American slaves to become Universalists. One of the reasons, of course, was racism, even though Universalists really put it on the line there. But because Donald Trump Pol Pot, Hitler, they're all there with us. Because A, we talk about the inherent worth and dignity, but in universalism, all are saved. And we'll talk about what saved means now, as we know what it meant then. And so that's a hard message, especially for African American slaves, because they're going to say, okay, I'm catching hell here on this plantation, and you're going to tell me that when I die, old master's going to be in the same room with me? I don't think so. So it's a hard sell. People from ISIS will be there, and I'm using heaven metaphorically. But there's always the inherent worth and dignity. And so we don't say we affirm the inherent worth and dignity if you think the way we think. If you don't cut off people's heads. If you don't, we don't say that. We say we affirm the inherent worth and dignity, period. Humanity has the annoying tendency of succumbing to ignorant and damaging divisions of race and religion and gender and sexuality and class and politics, etc., etc. We alienate ourselves from each other. The earth, we alienate ourselves from the larger cosmos because our seventh principle reminds us that everything is interconnected and interdependent. We alienate ourselves when we say we're you use and you're not. Now we'll fight like banshees because we have that rebel spirit in the sense that we don't want to be put in a box, but we put ourselves in boxes. Universalists were cognizant of these dangers when we condemned slavery in 1791. We were cognizant of these dangers when we ordained Olympia Brown as the first woman minister in these United States on June 23, 1863. Universalist minister Hosea Ballou called for Universalists to extend their our simple, but demanding message of love to all social classes everywhere. On a planet where there is war, on a planet where there is starvation, disease, homelessness, ethnic and racial strife, economic shenanigans, not to mention the changes in the ecosystem, what does universalism have to say for such a time as this? Well, universalism, as well as Unitarianism, reminds humanity of the relatedness of all beings. Regardless of what existentialism has claimed, we as human beings are not alone and isolated in this universe. We are connected to all that is, and we are part of a creative process that is far greater than ourselves and that which we may never understand. Nor do we have to. You don't have to know all the answers to everything. It's okay to say, I don't know. Universalism has affirmed a belief in a benign rather than hostile universe. Now, Albert Einstein said the most important question that we can ask as human beings is the universe a friendly place? And the answer to that question is crucial, because we will respond to everything in our lives based on the answer to that question. Fear or love. Universalism reminds us that we are all interconnected and that we are part of something greater. Again, if you're uncomfortable with the word God, some of us are, some of us aren't, you're an adult, work your way through it. If you want to use some other word, that's fine. But just remember the vocabulary is not nearly as important as the principle. Universalism teaches us that no one, and I gave you some examples, no one is outside of God's grace. We all know what it's like to be an outsider. We all know, at least on some level, what it feels like to be marginalized and not wanted. That's why many of us left our religion of origin. And sadly, many of us have been made to feel unwanted, even within Unitarian Universalism itself. But the truth of the matter is that Universalism says that all are included in the human story. And this is radically different from Orthodox Christianity, which seeks to limit heaven and hell to a chosen few, to the saved and not saved. Growing up as a Baptist, I know what my Orthodox Christian brothers and sisters mean when they say saved. It's just that it doesn't resonate with me in their context. I can say that I've been saved at times in my life, many times, by the unconditional love of others. I can say that. And perhaps we've all been saved by those who came before us, who held fast to their truth, in spite of the threats. People like John Murray, the founder of Universalism in this country. People like Olympia Brown, Hosea Ballou. Perhaps these are our saviors. Perhaps the meaning of grace is that we must be open to the possibility that there are sources that we don't even know of. Dr. King calls it cosmic companionship. But sources that beyond ourselves, that sustain us and transform us, and they save us, and they hold us tight in the arms of life and love. If this is true, then grace is already here, has been given, is being given even now, and will continue to be given. Perhaps the real heresy that we are all guilty of from time to time is that we believe there is no gift. That in times of trouble, we find ourselves having to face the truth. That there is only grace. And you got to remember, and for Universalists, at least I'm painting with a broad brush, we're not as cerebral. You can't get there from here, right? The longest distance we'll ever take is from here to here. It is grace when we are helped by love, by the earth, by the stars, by our being curious or surprised when we thought that life was really not worth the effort. And Dr. King's mentor, Dr. Howard Thurman, reminds us that the contradictions of life are not final. This is what Easter's about. You can't have Easter without Good Friday. And Howard Thurman reminds us that every day there's a crown placed over our head that each day we are growing tall enough to wear. And so whether you believe in heaven or hell is not the point. We can all agree that there is plenty of hell in this life. Much of this hell is because of people who continue to divide others with the us versus them mentality. Much of the hell in this life is because we have brought into and invested in this lie in the belief of separation. You're Tea Party, I'm not. You're ISIS, I'm not. You're Donald Trump, I'm not. There would be no Donald Trump if it wasn't for us collectively. And we don't like to hear that. But if you say you affirm the seventh principle, and if all life is interconnected, then you are Donald Trump. And so am I. You are ISIS. And so am I. It's hubris to think otherwise. And so the belief in this separateness is the cause, this ego is the cause of much suffering. And it's costly indeed. Universalism opposes this mindset. And it doesn't mean that Donald Trump is right. I'm just harping on Mr. Trump today, or anybody. But once you lose sight of his humanity, then you're just as bad as he is. You're just as bad as he is. If you no longer see him as a person with hopes and fears and children and lots of money, once you lose sight of him as a human being, then you're no different than Trump, really. And you don't have to agree with him to keep that in mind. There's a poem I read long ago by a man by the name of Edward Markham, and it goes like this. He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the will to win. We drew a circle that took him in. The UUA's Welcoming Congregation Initiative and its anti-racism initiative shows a commitment to this interconnectedness of universalism, as do all of our social justice efforts, because we know what it's like. We're human beings. We experience loss and death and separation and despair. We know what it's like to feel marginalized. No one has a monopoly on that. And we also feel alone. And then along comes John Murray. He's the founder of Universalism in this country. He's from England. He was excommunicated from the Methodist Church as a heretic. His wife and infant son had died. He was arrested and placed in debtor's prison because he had no money. When Murray sailed to America from England in 1770, he was a broken man. But little did he know that a man by the name of Thomas Potter was inspired. He had a dream, like Martin had. He had a dream, he had a vision, that a minister would one day come and preach in his chapel. So this was Potter's dream. Thomas Potter was waiting for John Murray in Good Luck, New Jersey. This is where his ship landed. Murray preached in Potter's chapel, and he turned the page on a new life, and he became the founder of Universalism in America. Universalism, ladies and gentlemen, is a way of life. It is not an intellectual exercise that you have to accept. It is a way of life. It's not a theory. And it's not something that we need to debate or argue about. It requires us to be open to all people. Not always an easy thing to do, as I just said a few sentences ago. It requires us to leave our self-righteousness right there, at the door. And to recognize the basic humanity of all people, to recognize their inherent worth and dignity. And it requires that we act with hope in the face of misery. In the words of German clergyman Thomas Kempis, who lived in late medieval European history, we will not be judged by what we've read, or how eloquent we are, rather by what we've done. Not by how well we have spoken, but how well we've lived. There's an awful lot of despair in our world in the face of human beings and humanity to other human beings. We know the problems in government. We know the economic problems, the social problems. Universalism gives us something to cope with. It recognizes interconnection, a vision which proclaims the universality of grace. We look at Jesus as one of a number of many avatars and special human beings, if you will, who have come to teach us how to live a committed life, how to live in unity. He's not the only one. His death reflects a tragic and painful end of life. But because we've always rejected the idea of original sin, the belief that Jesus atoned for the sins of this world has little relevance for us. Even when Unitarianism and Universalism were clearly Christian faiths, remember that, we were part of the Protestant Reformation. And as Malcolm X said, you can't hate the roots without hating the tree. Okay? We were Christian. We're not now. But a lot of us aren't even welcome to Christians in our denomination, in our churches on Sunday. Because we're uncomfortable with it. Early Universalists and later Unitarians, they caught up, were convinced that the greatest power in the cosmos is love, and that no one was beyond its embrace. They believed that love was the source of all the happiness and harmony that we needed. We also believed that punishment was not to be about destruction, but instruction, to teach and to reconcile happiness and harmony. There's no everlasting hell for people to go to, because hell offers no chance of renewal. It offers no chance of regeneration. We Universalists preach the gospel which proclaim that nothing in the world, this one or the next, could take you beyond the love of God, and that this love would remedy all sin. And so if no action can separate us from this love, then no human being even has a right to try to. If God's punishment is only to teach and reform, then if it's to be legitimate, human punishment must only be used for teaching and reform as well. If God rejects vengeance, then human beings must reject vengeance. If God rejects abandonment, then human beings must reject abandonment. And so we argue that universal and unconditional love is it's not only a description, but it's how we stay in relationship. And this goes to all brothers and sisters. Two-legged, four-legged, those with wings, those that crawl, and those that swim. In this way, we seek and open our hearts to make room for serenity and peace. We get rid of anti-life ideas. We don't pour old wine into new wineskins. And so in closing, in his first sermon in America on September 30th, 1770, John Murray said these words: "Go out into the highways and byways of America. This is your new country. Give the people blanketed with the decaying and crumbling Calvinism something of your new vision. You may only possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it to bring more light and understanding to the hearts of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Do not push them further into their theological despair, but preach the kindness and everlasting love of God." Universalist minister Hosea Ballou says this: "If we agree in love, there's no disagreement that can do us any harm. But if we do not, there's no agreement that can do us any good." Let us endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bonds of peace. So these are condensed, it's a condensed history I gave you this morning, but these are beautiful words from beautiful minds. Herein these words lies the key to inner peace. In these words lies the faith of the Universalist. Herein lies the peace that passes all understanding. And herein these words lies the peace of God. May it always be so. Amen. And blessed be. Yeah.
Well, all right, this is the time where we will have questions or comments that people would like to make. Natalie.
I don't know if anyone besides me has ever heard of Murray Grove in New Jersey. It's supposedly where he first came ashore, and it is a UU retreat, and our UU congregation, Monmouth County, New Jersey, used to go down there for a weekend every year.
Yeah.
Was everybody a Universalist there?
I'm Jane Oakes, and I grew up in Framingham, Massachusetts, so there's a lot of history between the Congregationalists and the Unitarians. And sometime in the, I'm not sure when it happened, but sometime late in the 1800s probably, the Congregational church that was on the village green, every New England town has a little village green, kicked the Congregationalists out the church, kept the building, and across the village green, the Congregational church was built. And that's the church I grew up in, was the Congregational church. Across the green, my first husband grew up in the Unitarian church, and we were married for several years, and sadly he's passed now, but that was I often attended church with my father-in-law at that church. So for me, my background, even though it's in Congregationalism, it's also, my heart is in the Unitarian.
Yeah, and we get our polity from the Congregationalist church. I don't know if you knew that. The polity of that, our polity, the way we govern. Where the minister is not the boss. The power is in the congregation. I mean, yeah.
It's a democracy.
Yeah. So we got that from Congregationalists. I just want to throw these dates out at you. Don't worry. John Murray was born in 1741 and he died in 1815. He died in Boston, Massachusetts in 1809 he had a stroke in 1809, which contributed to his death later in 1815. In 1775, he was appointed chaplain by George Washington for the Rhode Island Brigade, and he was suspected of being a British spy, but Washington ignored that, and a lot of the chaplains were hostile to him because he didn't believe in hell. And on October 23rd, 1793, he served the Universalist Society of Boston. So, I mean, you can look it up. I mean, you can do more. I wasn't trying to make you not want to be a Unitarian. I was just saying that we merged in 1961, a marriage of convenience, because both denominations were not growing, which we're not doing now either. And just know that they're part of our history, and we are partners in liberal religion in this country.
Thanks, Michael. Boy, you always give us good food for thought. And
Thank you.
I assume that there's others in the room that are like me, that it's like, boy, can I love my enemies? You know, like you're telling me that as a Unitarian Universalist, that is what I am supposed to be doing. And that's difficult, you know, as you said, even to love Hitler and to think about them being in grace, and yet one side of me says, yeah, they are, you know, but I've lost sight of that, or, you know, and do I really believe that if I've lost sight of it? And it's hard, you know, to accept the men that you listed that to me have done unspeakable things. But I also like what you said at the end about that we are to rehabilitate instead of punish. And so I guess in that rehabilitation we also include them in our good thoughts and prayers. I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
It's listen, in my personal theology, you know, this is not something you just do. It's like when you're in 12 steps. It's progress, not perfection. You may not ever this lifetime learn to love that way. I'm not saying everybody should. I'm just saying you have to follow your own path, but this is what we profess. And so that's all I'm saying. I'm not asking you, I'm just saying this is what you do. The part for me, Robbie, like you said, what the part of me loves. But then when we think rationally, that's the other part that says, no, you shouldn't do that. That doesn't make sense. That wasn't, you know, what do you mean? But that's what you want to get away from. That rational, you know, if whether you believe the story is true or not, a man was nailed to a piece of wood and forgave the people who were doing it. The black people in Charlotte, where was the massacre? Charleston. They forgave. It's possible, if you want to do it. And I'm not saying this is you, Robbie, because I know you, and I think I know your spirit. But a lot of people say it's hard, and that's an excuse for them not to try. Oh, that's really hard. Whoever said life wasn't going to be hard? Spiritual growth sometimes is hard, it's demanding. But you don't beat yourself up for it. You try, and you pick yourself up when you don't. Yes, ma'am.
My faith grew up in a Christian fundamentalist fellowship. And during that time, we said many of the same things that you shared today. But what I learned that just kind of blew my mind about how easy it would be was that it's up to God to judge people and for me to love people. Made it so it released me, because in order to judge somebody, you have to have all the sides to the story, you have to know the whole picture, you have to, you know, so it's so easy to forgive somebody when you realize that you don't have to think all that through, you just simply love them because you know that they have gone through some kind of a trial or tribulation, hard time or easy time, whatever, to get to where they are today.
And I will admit, just to say, and this gentleman over here, love is abstract. So you gotta find the definition of love that she may be talking about may not work for you. I kind of like Scott Peck's definition, that when I extend my love, myself, for the growth of another human being. Because love, some people think, well, that's kind of kumbaya. And again, it's a process. It's a process. This may take years to do. For those of you, the God language kind of gets you. Eckhart Tolle puts it this way. When you realize it's not personal, then you don't have to respond as it is, as if it is personal. You don't have to react because it's other people's pain, and you don't have to take that pain on.
For me, it's just as simple as separating the person from the act. We don't know why that person that does the abominable thing does it. We don't know what stresses and what personal struggles they've had. We can only say, thank God, they did it. We condemn the act. We've got to accept that person because whatever they went through caused that.
Yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. And if you're not there, you don't beat yourself up. I remember someone said to me when my brother was murdered, and I have worked through that and forgave him. A lot of therapy, just working through when I'm not for the death penalty in any situation. And someone said to me, which I kind of knew I would hear that eventually, well, if you lost somebody who was murdered, and I have lost 2 people in my family who were murdered, but that doesn't mean you have to forgive. It doesn't mean that. It just means that's the path I took this time around. Maybe in another life I was the murderer, or maybe I was the slave master, who knows? But I just know this is my path now. But if life is evolution, then if you don't get it now, you'll get it eventually. Because life goes on, and on, and on. Energy, as Einstein tells us, cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. And since everything is energy, it gives you something to think about the rest of the day. I'm going to have some energy. I'm going to have some beer and watch the energetic football game. I'm going to drink a cold bottle of energy. And one day Phil and I are going to have one of those together. We said we were going to do that.
So blessed be. Thank you.